She was my college roommate, and her secret changed everything. It was a rainy afternoon when I found myself staring out the window of our shared apartment, the world outside blurred by droplets racing down the glass. The soft patter of rain was a comforting backdrop to my thoughts, which were anything but calm. I had just returned from a long day at work, my mind still tangled in the mundane details of spreadsheets and deadlines. As I sank into the worn couch, I caught a glimpse of her, Lila, sitting cross-legged on her bed, a book resting on her lap, her brow furrowed in concentration. Lila had always been an enigma to me. With her wild curls framing her face and those captivating green eyes that sparkled with mischief, she was the kind of person who drew attention without even trying. I often found myself lost in thought about her, how she would laugh at the most mundane jokes or how her smile could light up a room. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that made my heart race just a bit faster when she entered the room. As I watched her, I felt a familiar pang of longing mixed with confusion. We had shared countless late-night conversations about our dreams and fears, but there was an unspoken tension between us that neither of us dared to address. It was as if we were two ships passing in the night, each caught in our own storms but drawn inexplicably to each other. "Hey," Lila said suddenly, breaking my reverie. Her voice was soft yet filled with an undercurrent of something deeper. "You okay? You seem distant." I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil swirling within me. "Just tired from work," I replied, though we both knew it was more than that. I could feel the weight of my unexpressed feelings pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. She nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" There was sincerity in her tone that made my heart flutter. "Yeah, I know," I said, but even as I spoke those words, I felt a wall rising between us, a barrier built from fear and uncertainty. How could I explain the way my heart raced when she brushed against me, or how every shared laugh felt like a secret promise? Instead, I changed the subject, desperate to deflect the conversation away from my inner turmoil. "Have you finished that book yet?" I asked, gesturing toward the novel resting on her lap. She laughed softly, the sound like music to my ears. "Not yet. It's getting really good, though." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, we fell into our usual rhythm, sharing insights about our favorite characters and debating plot twists, but beneath our playful banter lay an unacknowledged tension that crackled in the air between us. It was as if we were both dancing around something monumental without ever daring to step into its light. As night fell and shadows crept into our apartment, I found myself restless. The rain had stopped outside, leaving behind a fresh scent that mingled with the warmth of our shared space. Lila had turned off her bedside lamp and pulled out her laptop to watch something on Netflix. The glow from the screen cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting her features in a way that made my breath hitch. I couldn't help but steal glances at her as she laughed at whatever show she was watching. Each laugh felt like an invitation, a call to step closer and bridge the gap that had formed between us. But just as quickly as those thoughts flared up within me, they were extinguished by doubt. What if she didn't feel the same? What if this delicate balance we had built would shatter if I dared to reach out? As if sensing my turmoil, Lila paused the show and turned toward me again. "You're really quiet tonight," she observed gently. "I guess I'm just thinking," I admitted cautiously. "About what?" She pressed softly, and I hesitated for a moment before deciding to take a leap, one small step toward honesty. "About us," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened slightly as she processed my words. The air around us thickened with unspoken possibilities as we both held our breath in anticipation of what would come next. Would this be the moment when everything shifted? Would we finally confront what had been simmering beneath the surface? But before either of us could respond further, there was a knock at our door, a sharp interruption that shattered the fragile tension hanging between us. My heart sank as reality crashed back in like waves against rocky shores. Lila looked at me apologetically before getting up to answer it. As she opened the door to reveal one of our mutual friends standing there with an armful of snacks and an excited grin, I felt that familiar ache return. The longing for something more than friendship mixed with frustration at how close yet unreachable it felt. As laughter filled our apartment once more, and distractions pulled us apart from that pivotal moment, I couldn't shake off the feeling that everything was about to change. That Lila's secret might soon come to light and alter everything between us forever. The days that followed our conversation at the gathering felt charged with an unspoken energy, a current running just beneath the surface of our friendship. Lila and I fell into a rhythm that was both familiar and new, filled with shared laughter and subtle glances that lingered a moment too long. Each interaction seemed to deepen the bond between us, while simultaneously amplifying the internal conflict swirling within me. One Saturday morning, the sun streamed through our apartment window, casting golden rays across the living room. I was curled up on the couch with a cup of coffee, savoring the warmth of the mug against my palms. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of rain from the night before. I could hear Lila humming softly in her room, a melody that danced through the apartment like a gentle breeze. "Hey, you want to join me for breakfast?" I called out, breaking the comfortable silence. A moment later, Lila appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled and her eyes bright with sleep. She wore an oversized sweatshirt that hung off one shoulder, and I couldn't help but smile at how effortlessly beautiful she looked. "What's on the menu?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. "Just some toast and fruit," I replied, trying to keep my tone light as my heart raced at her presence. "But I can whip up some eggs if you're feeling fancy." "Eggs sound perfect," she said with a grin, stepping further into the room. The sight of her smile sent a rush of warmth through me, igniting that familiar tension that had become all too common between us. As I moved to prepare breakfast, Lila settled onto the couch, stretching her legs out in front of her. "So, what's your plan for today?" she asked casually, leaning back against the cushions. "I was thinking about going for a run later," I said, glancing over my shoulder at her. "Maybe hit up that new cafe afterward." "Count me in. I could use some fresh air," she replied enthusiastically. We spent the next few minutes cooking together in comfortable silence, punctuated by laughter as we playfully tossed bits of food at each other. The sound of her laughter was like music to my ears, light and infectious, and it filled me with an overwhelming sense of joy. But beneath that joy lay an undercurrent of anxiety. Every shared moment felt like a step closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready for. After breakfast, we decided to head out for our run. The sun was shining brightly now, casting a warm glow over everything it touched. As we jogged side by side through the park, I couldn't help but steal glances at Lila. Her hair bounced with each stride, and there was a carefree energy about her that made my heart race. "Hey," she said suddenly, breaking my thoughts as we slowed to a walk to catch our breath. "Do you remember that time we got lost on our way to class?" I laughed at the memory. The two of us wandering around campus for nearly an hour before realizing we had taken a wrong turn. How could I forget? "You insisted we take that shortcut. And it ended up being a dead end," she added with mock indignation. "I swear you have no sense of direction." I feigned offense as we walked along the path lined with blooming flowers. "Excuse me. My sense of direction is perfectly fine." We continued bantering back and forth until we reached a small cafe nestled among trees, bursting with vibrant green leaves. The smell of freshly baked pastries wafted through the air as we stepped inside, and I felt my stomach rumble in response. "What do you want?" Lila asked as we approached the counter. "I'll go for one of those blueberry muffins," I replied, eyeing the display case filled with tempting treats. "Make it two," she said cheerfully before turning to place our order. As we settled into a cozy corner table with our muffins and steaming cups of coffee, I felt an overwhelming sense of contentment wash over me. We chatted easily about everything and nothing, our favorite movies, upcoming plans for summer break, and even our dreams for the future. Each moment felt like a thread weaving us closer together, but beneath that warmth lay an ever-present tension, a fear gnawing at me that threatened to unravel everything we had built. What if Lila wanted more than friendship? What if she saw me differently? The thought sent shivers down my spine. It was exhilarating yet terrifying. As we finished our muffins and sipped our coffee in companionable silence, Lila leaned back in her chair and studied me intently. "You know," she began slowly, "I've really enjoyed spending time together lately." My heart raced at her words. They hung in the air like unspoken possibilities. "Me too," I replied cautiously. "I feel like we're getting closer," she continued, her voice softening. "Like there's something more between us." The weight of her words settled heavily on my chest. My pulse quickened as I searched for a response, something that wouldn't shatter this fragile moment or reveal too much too soon. "Yeah, it does feel different," I managed to say. Lila's gaze held mine for what felt like an eternity. There was so much unspoken between us in those moments, desire mingled with fear and uncertainty. But just as quickly as it had come, doubt crept back in like an unwelcome shadow. Before either of us could delve deeper into those uncharted waters, Lila reached for her phone as it buzzed on the table, a distraction that pulled us back into reality once more. Her expression shifted slightly as she glanced at the screen before looking up at me again. "Sorry, it's my mom," she said apologetically as she answered it. I nodded absently while listening to her side of the conversation, her tone shifting from playful to serious as she discussed plans for an upcoming family gathering. My heart sank slightly. Family gatherings often meant expectations and scrutiny, things I wasn't sure either of us were ready to face. As she hung up moments later. Lila sighed heavily and ran a hand through her hair in frustration.
Ugh.
"Family drama," she muttered before looking over at me again with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that." "It's okay," I replied softly, though my mind raced with thoughts about what this might mean for us moving forward. After finishing our coffee and saying goodbye to the cafe staff who had become familiar faces during our visits, we stepped back outside into the warm afternoon sun. As we walked side by side again toward home, I couldn't shake off this feeling that something was about to change, that our connection was teetering on the edge of something profound yet terrifyingly uncertain. Later that evening, while lying in bed staring at the ceiling above me, I replayed every moment from our day together. The laughter shared over breakfast, those lingering glances during our run, and felt both exhilarated and terrified by what lay ahead. The tension between us had grown palpable. Every brush of skin felt electric against my own, a reminder that this friendship was evolving into something deeper whether either of us wanted it or not. As sleep finally claimed me amidst swirling thoughts and emotions battling within me like storm clouds overhead, one thing became clear. Whatever happened next would change everything between us forever. The following week felt like a slow march toward an inevitable confrontation, each day filled with an undercurrent of tension that neither Lila nor I could ignore. Our connection had deepened, but so had the weight of unspoken words and emotions that hung between us like a fragile thread. I could feel it in the way our laughter lingered a moment too long, in the way our hands brushed against each other as we passed the salt or reached for the remote. Each fleeting touch sent sparks through my skin, igniting a longing that was becoming harder to suppress. It was a Friday night when everything changed. Lila had suggested we have a movie marathon, something we used to do frequently, but had fallen out of habit with our busy schedules. I welcomed the idea, eager for an excuse to spend more time with her in the cozy confines of our apartment, away from prying eyes and expectations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through our living room window, I prepared popcorn while Lila sifted through our collection of movies. The scent of buttery popcorn filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of candles we had lit earlier, vanilla and lavender, creating an inviting atmosphere. "Okay, I've got it," Lila exclaimed, holding up a romantic comedy with a playful grin. "This one is guaranteed to make us laugh. Only if you promise not to cry at the end," I teased, tossing a piece of popcorn her way. She caught it midair and popped it into her mouth with a triumphant smile. "No promises." We settled onto the couch, our bodies close but not quite touching. The opening credits rolled as we lost ourselves in the film's light-hearted antics. Laughter bubbled up between us, filling the room with warmth and familiarity. But as the movie progressed and romantic moments unfolded on screen, I felt my heart begin to race, not just from the humor, but from the undeniable chemistry that crackled in the air around us. About halfway through, Lila turned to me during a particularly sweet scene where the main characters shared their first kiss. "Can you believe how cheesy this is?" she said with a laugh, but her eyes held something deeper, an intensity that made my breath hitch. "Yeah, but it's sweet," I replied softly, my heart pounding as I met her gaze. "It's nice to see people being vulnerable like that." Her expression shifted slightly as she considered my words. "Vulnerability is scary," she said quietly. "But sometimes it's worth it." The weight of her statement hung in the air between us, thickening the tension that had been building for weeks. I could feel my pulse quicken as I searched her eyes for understanding. Was she hinting at something more? Did she feel what I felt? As if sensing my internal struggle, Lila leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we were vulnerable with each other?" My heart raced at her words. They felt like an invitation and a challenge all at once. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "I mean, what if we stopped pretending?" she said, her gaze unwavering as she searched my eyes for answers. In that moment, everything felt suspended in time. The world outside faded away as I became acutely aware of her presence beside me. The warmth radiating from her body was intoxicating. Every fiber of my being urged me to lean closer and bridge that final gap between us. "I don't want to pretend anymore," I confessed, my voice trembling slightly as vulnerability washed over me like a tide pulling me under. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she processed my words. There was an intensity in her gaze that made my heart race even faster. "Neither do I," she whispered, and then it happened, a shift in the air around us that felt electric and inevitable. Without thinking, I leaned forward just as she did, and our lips met in a tentative kiss that sent shockwaves through me. It was soft at first, an exploration filled with hesitation, but then it deepened as we both surrendered to the moment. The taste of her lips was sweet and familiar. Every nerve ending in my body ignited as I pressed closer against her. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer as if trying to erase any distance that remained between us. Her fingers tangled in my hair as she responded with equal fervor, deepening the kiss until it felt like everything else faded away, the movie forgotten, the world outside lost in oblivion. But just as quickly as it began, doubt crept back in like an unwelcome intruder. My mind raced with questions. What did this mean for us? What would happen when reality returned? As if sensing my hesitation, Lila pulled back slightly, our foreheads resting against each other as we caught our breath. "What just happened?" she asked softly, her voice laced with both excitement and uncertainty. "I don't know," I admitted breathlessly, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. But it felt right. "Yeah," she murmured, her eyes searching mine for answers. "But what does this mean for us?" The question hung heavy in the air between us, a chasm filled with uncertainty and fear of what lay ahead. My heart raced at the thought of crossing this threshold into uncharted territory. Everything felt both exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "I don't want to lose what we have," I confessed quietly, feeling vulnerable under her gaze. "Me neither," Lila replied softly, brushing her thumb against my cheek, a tender gesture that sent shivers down my spine. But even as we spoke those words of caution, there was an undeniable pull between us, a magnetic force that drew us together despite our fears. The tension remained unresolved. We were standing on the edge of something profound yet terrifying. Just then, there was a sudden knock at our door, a loud interruption that shattered our intimate moment like glass breaking against concrete. My heart sank as reality crashed back in around us. We were no longer alone. Lila glanced toward the door before looking back at me with wide eyes filled with uncertainty. "Do you want to answer it?" she asked hesitantly. I shook my head slowly. Part of me wanted nothing more than to stay lost in this moment with her, to explore what lay beneath our shared vulnerability without interruption. But another part of me knew we couldn't hide forever from whatever consequences awaited us outside this room. "We should probably see who it is," I said reluctantly, though every fiber of my being wanted to remain wrapped up in this cocoon of intimacy we had just created. As Lila got up to answer the door, I felt an ache deep within me, a longing for what could have been if only we'd had more time before reality intruded once again. The unresolved tension lingered between us like smoke hanging in the air after a fire, a reminder that while we had crossed one boundary tonight, many more lay ahead waiting for us to navigate together. The knock at the door echoed in my mind, a jarring reminder that reality was never far behind our moments of intimacy. Lila and I pulled apart, the warmth of our kiss still lingering on my lips, but the air between us had shifted. I could see the uncertainty reflected in her eyes as she moved toward the door, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "Just a second," she called out, her voice slightly shaky. I could hear her heart racing as she opened the door, revealing our friend Mia standing there, a bright smile plastered across her face. "Hey, I hope I'm not interrupting anything," Mia chirped, oblivious to the charged atmosphere in the room. Her cheerful demeanor felt like a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. "Not at all," Lila replied too quickly, her voice lacking its usual warmth. She stepped back to let Mia in, and I forced myself to smile as she walked past me, completely unaware of the tension that had just unfolded. "Are you guys ready for game night?" Mia asked, her enthusiasm infectious, but unwelcome at that moment. "I brought snacks." "Of course," I said, trying to sound casual despite the turmoil inside me. Lila shot me a glance filled with uncertainty, and I could feel the weight of what had just happened hanging between us like a thick fog. As we settled into the living room with Mia's assortment of snacks spread across the coffee table, I struggled to focus on the game. My mind kept drifting back to that kiss, the taste of Lila's lips, the warmth of her body pressed against mine. It felt like an awakening, yet it was overshadowed by guilt and fear. What had we done? What would this mean for us moving forward? Mia chattered on about her week, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm brewing around us. Lila joined in occasionally, but I could see her mind was elsewhere too. Our glances exchanged over the table were filled with unspoken words and unresolved tension. We were both grappling with what had just transpired while trying to maintain an air of normalcy. As the night wore on and laughter filled our apartment, I felt increasingly suffocated by my own thoughts. The game felt trivial compared to what lay beneath the surface between Lila and me. When Mia finally left around midnight, I breathed a sigh of relief. At least we could talk now without distractions. But as soon as Mia closed the door behind her, Lila turned to me with wide eyes. "We need to talk," she said firmly. I nodded, my heart racing again as we settled back onto the couch. The tension was palpable. Every moment stretched out like an eternity as I searched for the right words to say. "What just happened?" Lila asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. It felt incredible, but also terrifying. Lila ran a hand through her hair in frustration. "I didn't want to ruin our friendship," she confessed. "But when you kissed me, it just felt so right." "But what does this mean for us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if we can't go back after this?" Her expression shifted from uncertainty to determination. "Maybe we shouldn't go back," she said quietly. "Maybe we should explore this, whatever it is." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air between us, a mix of excitement and fear that threatened to consume me whole. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, an incoming text that shattered our fragile moment once again. It was from my boyfriend, Alex. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're having a good night." My heart sank as guilt washed over me like ice water. Alex had no idea what was happening between Lila and me. He trusted me completely while I was here contemplating a future with someone else entirely. "Who is it?" Lila asked curiously. It's Alex," I admitted reluctantly. Her expression shifted at the mention of his name, a flicker of hurt flashing across her face before she masked it with indifference.
Oh,
"I should probably respond," I said hesitantly, feeling torn between two worlds, one filled with comfort and familiarity and another pulsing with desire and uncertainty. "Yes, sure," she replied softly, though there was an edge to her tone that made my stomach twist. I typed out a quick response. "All good. Just hanging out with Lila," and hit send before looking back at her. The silence stretched between us again. It felt heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. "What are we doing?" Lila finally asked, breaking the tension that hung thick in the air. "I don't know," I admitted honestly again. "But I can't keep lying to myself or to Alex." She nodded slowly, understanding flickering in her eyes, but also fear. Fear of what this meant for both of us if we chose to pursue something deeper while still tied to others. If sensing my internal conflict, Lila reached out and took my hand in hers, a simple gesture that sent shivers down my spine. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together," she said softly. But even as she spoke those words of reassurance, doubt crept back into my mind like an unwelcome shadow. What if this choice led us down a path we couldn't return from? What if pursuing this connection meant hurting others? The next few days passed in a blur. Every interaction with Alex felt strained as guilt gnawed at me from within. He was sweet and attentive, always checking in on me, but every time he smiled or touched my arm affectionately, it felt like a reminder of everything I was hiding from him. Lila and I continued our routine, sharing meals and laughter, but there was an undeniable shift in our dynamic. Every glance held unspoken promises. Every brush of skin ignited sparks that left us both breathless, yet terrified. One evening after dinner, while cleaning up together in silence, Lila finally broke the tension again. "We can't keep pretending forever," she said quietly. "I know," I replied softly as guilt washed over me anew. "But what do we do? How do we move forward without hurting anyone?" Before she could respond, my phone buzzed again, a message from Alex asking if he could come over later that evening for some quality time together. My heart sank at his request. Part of me wanted nothing more than to be with him, while another part yearned for freedom, to explore what lay beneath this connection with Lila without external pressures looming overhead. "I think you should see him," Lila said after reading my expression, a mixture of understanding and resignation etched across her face. "But what about us?" I asked desperately. "We can't keep hiding," she replied firmly but gently. "You need to figure things out with him first before we can even think about what this means for us." Her words struck deep within me, a painful truth that resonated louder than any desire or longing ever could. But it didn't make saying goodbye any easier when Alex arrived later that evening. As he walked through our door with his usual bright smile and warm embrace, I felt an ache deep within me, a longing for something more than friendship, mixed with guilt over betraying his trust by even considering another path alongside Lila's presence, looming ever closer nearby. We spent the evening watching movies together, his laughter filling up spaces where silence lingered too long. But even amidst those moments of joy came reminders that everything was shifting beneath our feet, like sand slipping away through fingers grasping tightly onto memories already fading fast into shadows cast by choices yet unmade. When Alex finally left late that night after sharing sweet goodbyes filled with affection, I felt hollow inside, a mixture of relief tinged heavily with regret over decisions still hanging precariously above us like storm clouds ready to burst forth any moment, now threatening chaos upon everything familiar once held dear. Before all this began unraveling around us, unexpectedly leaving scars etched deeply into hearts caught between two worlds colliding head-on without warning or mercy whatsoever, leaving behind only questions unanswered lingering long after he'd gone home, leaving me alone, once more facing reality alone, alongside uncertainty looming ever closer, waiting patiently just outside, waiting for its chance finally arrive, uninvited, crashing down upon fragile hopes built upon dreams still waiting patiently somewhere hidden away deep within longing hearts yearning desperately for answers never truly found until now. The days following my conversation with Alex felt like a whirlwind of emotions, each moment filled with a mix of relief and heartache. I had finally confronted the truth I had been avoiding, but the weight of that honesty settled heavily on my chest. It was a bittersweet release, one that left me feeling both liberated and lost. After our coffee date, I returned home to find Lila waiting for me on the couch, her expression a mixture of concern and hope. She looked up as I entered, her eyes searching mine for answers. "How did it go?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to ease slightly. "I told him everything," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil still swirling within me. "It was hard, but necessary." Lila's face softened as she moved closer, reaching out to take my hand in hers. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice filled with warmth and understanding. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted, squeezing her hand tightly. But I felt like I had to be honest with myself and with him. As we sat together on the couch, the silence between us was charged with unspoken words, a mixture of relief and unresolved tension lingering in the air. The kiss we had shared still echoed in my mind, a reminder of the connection we had forged amidst the chaos of our lives. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Lila asked quietly, her concern evident. "I hope so," I replied honestly. "He deserves someone who can give him their whole heart without hesitation. I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much." Lila nodded in understanding, her eyes reflecting empathy for both Alex and me. "It's never easy to let go," she said softly, "but sometimes it's necessary for growth." Her words resonated deeply within me. I realized that this journey was not just about navigating my feelings for Lila, but also about discovering who I truly was and what I wanted from life. The events of the past few weeks had forced me to confront my fears and desires head-on, a process that was both painful and liberating. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself navigating uncharted waters, learning how to be honest with myself and those around me. Lila and I began spending more time together, exploring our connection in ways that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Each shared moment brought us closer, yet there remained an undercurrent of uncertainty as we danced around the boundaries of our new relationship. One evening, as we sat together on the balcony watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lila turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "What do you want moving forward?" she asked gently. I took a moment to reflect on her question, feeling the weight of it settle within me. "I want to be true to myself," I said finally. "I want to embrace this connection with you without fear or hesitation." Lila smiled softly, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. "Then let's take it one step at a time," she suggested. "No pressure, just us figuring things out together." Her words filled me with hope. It felt like a promise that we could explore this new path without rushing into anything or losing sight of what mattered most: our friendship and connection. As time went on, I began to understand that embracing vulnerability didn't mean abandoning my past. It meant integrating those experiences into who I was becoming. My relationship with Alex had taught me valuable lessons about love and honesty, lessons that would shape how I approached my future with Lila. One afternoon, as we strolled through a local park hand in hand, laughter bubbling between us like sunlight breaking through clouds, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The world around us seemed brighter. Every moment felt infused with possibility. "Look at those ducks," Lila exclaimed suddenly, pointing at a small pond where a family of ducks paddled lazily across the water. Her excitement was infectious. I couldn't help but laugh as she tugged me closer to get a better view. "Adorable," I said playfully as we watched them quack and splash around. In that moment, surrounded by nature's beauty and Lila's laughter, I realized how far I had come, how much I had grown through this journey of self-discovery and acceptance. The fear that had once paralyzed me began to dissipate like morning mist under the sun's warm embrace. Later that evening, as we settled onto the couch for another movie night, this time without any interruptions, I felt a sense of contentment enveloping me like a warm blanket. Lila curled up beside me, resting her head on my shoulder as we lost ourselves in the film. But even amidst this comfort lingered an awareness that our journey was just beginning, a path filled with uncertainties waiting patiently ahead, filled with possibilities, yet untold, beckoning softly toward brighter days ahead. As the credits rolled and darkness settled outside our window, Lila turned toward me with an expression filled with sincerity. "Thank you for being honest," she said softly. "It means so much to me." I smiled back at her, feeling gratitude swell within my chest. A deep appreciation for everything we had shared thus far and everything still waiting ahead for us both, if only willing, brave enough, venture forth together, hand in hand, facing whatever came next, ready finally embrace whatever lay ahead, waiting patiently just beyond horizon, beckoning softly toward brighter days ahead, filled hope renewed, promising fresh starts, waiting patiently just beyond reach, still lingering close enough touch of Only willing, brave enough venture forth into uncharted waters together side by side, navigating storms ahead, hand in hand, facing whatever came next together, unafraid, ready, finally embrace whatever lay ahead, waiting patiently just beyond horizon, beckoning softly toward brighter days ahead, filled, hope renewed, promising fresh starts, waiting patiently just beyond reach, still lingering, close enough touch, if only willing, brave enough venture forth into uncharted waters together side by side, navigating storms ahead, hand in hand, facing whatever came next together, unafraid, ready, finally embrace whatever lay ahead, in that moment of quiet connection between us, filled with warmth, laughter, love. I knew that while challenges lay ahead, waiting patiently just beyond reach, still lingering, close enough touch, if only willing, brave enough venture forth into uncharted waters together side by side, navigating storms ahead, hand in hand, facing whatever came next together, unafraid, ready, finally embrace whatever lay ahead. We would face them together no matter what came next, knowing now more than ever how important it was finally be true ourselves first before anything else could ever truly flourish, blossom brightly beneath sun shining brightly, illuminating paths leading forward, guiding gently toward futures yet unwritten, waiting patiently just beyond horizon, beckoning softly toward brighter days ahead, filled, hope renewed, promising fresh starts, waiting patiently just beyond reach, still lingering, close enough touch, if only willing, brave enough venture forth into uncharted waters together side by side, navigating storms ahead, hand in hand, facing whatever came next together, unafraid, ready, finally embrace whatever lay ahead,